Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it's also uploaded as a YouTube video under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu, as well as being on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. Please feel free to leave a rating, like, follow, subscribe, review, whatever, depending on your platform that you're listening on, to help support the podcast. Today, I'm back with my co-host Teddy, and we are going to be talking about the future of Digimon, just because we did get a lot of new news and information that Bandai just decided to drop on us that actually could have a huge change and impact on the game as we know it. Obviously, all of this news comes from the Japanese side of things. We don't have any English confirmation yet, so take that with a grain of salt, but it is something that they're looking at trying to do nonetheless. And the big thing is going to be the unification of the game for global releases, on top of just talking about some design elements that it seems like they're trying to explore more and more, like alternate win conditions. So before we get into the news segment, as far as like where the meta is, Nationals is going to be happening, if not already happening by the time you're listening to this. I should already be in California, so if you see me, stop by, say hi. I'm a pretty open person. But yeah, Nationals is this week. That's pretty exciting. So I had a whole in-depth episode with GFG Tyler about it. So I'm going to steal Teddy's thunder and kind of continue the conversation and question from last week, where what do you expect to do well in Nationals? Or I guess better yet, what is the least expected deck that you think would do well in Nationals? I think that's a better one, because we kind of already know what some of the bigger decks are, but some people like to be extra spicy, bring something completely way out there that no one would expect, and they could end up doing relatively well with it. So I guess that's the question of the week is what's the least expected deck that you hope to see do well in Nationals?
What's funny is that was borderline the same question I was going to ask anyway. So I guess you beat me to it. But if I had to put an answer in there, um, I have a funny feeling some people are going to try and bring hunters, and they're not going to have a good time just because of the mass wide removal that's in the game at the current moment. Uh, I would be hard pressed to see a hunters deck do extremely well, even though theoretically it sounds like it would be okay until like Anubis and things like that. Um, I don't know. I think that would be the deck I think of immediately, where it's like it's definitely a solid deck, but I think it's just this is not the metaphor.
Uh, I kind of I could see that. Hunters is still a very strong deck. It was one of the stronger decks last format. I don't remember exactly what number it was off the top of my head in terms of like where it stood, in quotation marks, rank wise. Um, but basically, the deck that I kind of hope, and this is just a giant guilty pleasure of mine, is I kind of hope to see Leomon do well. I think Fortitude is a really strong mechanic when done well. There's space for some floodgates, even though Fortitude plus like anti play by effect floodgate doesn't exactly mesh, but because you're green, you could try to get off of it in order to, not suffer from that. But it is a little bit on the awkward. At worst, you could run Terriermon just to slow them down. It is a beast, so you do have like some beast and cyborg synergies. I don't know. Digivolve is also just incredibly annoying. So like my rogue pick would that I hope to see would be Leomon.
Man, I played that deck. It's cool, isn't it? It's super cool. Like I really dig the deck a lot. I like that pick. I think people will get caught off guard by what it's able to do. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I kind of hope I see. If maybe one or two squeeze in, I doubt it, but you never know.
Right. And there's still just a lot of like interesting decks. Like I think even though Grace Nova is still missing some pieces that we know it's going to be getting, I think that's a pretty good deck. Um I think Fanglong's in a really bad spot actually for this meta. It has like a few really good matchups, but in terms of like if the opponent is able to get going, I think just how much easy low level removal that we have just sniping level 5s and below um means that you just might not be able to play towards like its strengths. I did hear whispers down the grapevine that people are experimenting with like a purple like cycle engine just to be able to cycle through your deck, get divas in your trash, and then just use Cardinal to play Fanglong for cheap. Like, I guess that's a thing that you could try to do. I still don't know how good that is, um, or how fast that they
Uh,
can set it up. So I
it's
don't
one of
know.
those things. Playing, giving your opponent 7 memory in this meta is just bonkers. Like, it just, you set up so much. You put yourself in such a disadvantage.
Yeah,
And
because for the most part, I have a small little list of decks that I'm actually expecting to see the most at nationals, and these are kind of the decks that I like prepared towards. So, as far as the top deck, obviously that goes to Anubismon. Anubismon is just absolutely cracked. The fact that it could set up consistently turn two, it's like full combo, and most extras don't have a response by turn two to two level sixes and two level fours is kind of ridiculous. I think that Mirage is also going to be still really good as just the premier OTK deck. Some people might try Melga, but I think like if you're just playing Melga, you're better off just playing Mirage. And unfortunately, I also think that's kind of true with Lugamon, where it's just like if you're just playing Lugamon, you might as well just be playing Anubis because they're doing similar things, but one is drastically better than the other. Especially since Melga, the purple side of things got hurt, and this is the format where purple is actually supposed to be stronger than blue. So it's gonna be super awkward for Melga, and that's why I think Mirage is better. I still think Shine's gonna be good. Red Hybrids is gonna be good. Greymon is still gonna be good. Mostly Black War. Wargrey can be good, but I think just the control variant of like Black War is like still really strong with more removal, and the fact that they have the new X antibody combos better with him is really nice. So maybe that's going to be a big boost to Black War. Then other decks I'm expecting are Bloom, Security Control, and Yellow Vaccines. That's kind of like my quick and dirty 8 decks that I'm expected to play against the most.
I mean, that makes sense. I wish I was able to go so that I could, prepare and all that other fun stuff. I kind of get to relax for now, and then next season I'm gonna put money aside, and then even no matter where it is, I'm gonna take the trip anyway. But I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, you know you're gonna see your Anubises. You know you're gonna see the Greymons. You'll see all four, or not all four, so Mirage. Maybe you see an old force. I don't know, but
I think at that
um,
point you're just better off playing Mirage. Like
yeah,
this is the
exactly.
part where we're at because of Anubis warping the format and basically consolidating like play styles where it's just like if you're going to play an OTK deck, you might as well just play Mirage. If you're going to play a control deck, like there's no reason to ever play Machine Dramon in this meta just because one, you're slower than Greymon and you're also slower than D Brigade, but you have some higher levels of defense, but because you don't do well against go wide decks very good, you kind of just lose to the amount of flood that other decks can just threaten you with.
Yeah, it's just like you're more better off just being able to either you say you kill them in one turn or you don't. So it's like it makes sense to play like Mirage and over like any other blue deck currently at the moment.
Yeah,
I could see Blue Hybrid doing okay. Um,
blue hybrid's
just
slower than red hybrid though. That's the big thing. Like, yeah, they get
I think it's
Zoodome
because the
Ace
decks
to
just
help.
I think it's just because the decks that are going wide can get punished quite hard, but I don't think it's good enough to like. I could see a very good pilot making it work, but it won't be one of those like, oh, we'll see a bunch of them just to counter it. It'll maybe like a pilot or two might take it and do really well, just because it's inherent anti anti matchup against those decks that just flood the board, and they're able to run both the memory and the reduction floodgates easily in the deck, which isn't the biggest deal to the decks because they can remove them very easily, but it's still it still matters somewhat. Um,
Yeah,
I
plus
could
they also get access to like a really cute and cheeky like counter card in the form of Full Metal. I don't exactly remember what the full name of it was. It's like Full Metal Cannon, I think.
the Full Metal Storm, the X
Full Metal.
antibody,
Yes, full. No, not Full Metal. Is it Full Metal Storm?
the one for Metal Gurumon,
EX4.
right?
It's EX4.
Is it?
Yes. It's
Oh,
Full Metal Blaze. That's it.
okay. I
So
was
like
like,
a lot of decks are gonna try to tech in against go wide stuff because you just have a lot of decks. Like I don't know why we just randomly got a whole bunch of decks that just want to go wide, like all back to back. But Full Metal Blaze is like one of Blue's best answers for go wides because you bounce 2 level 4 lowers and then you also can bounce a level 6 or higher if they have enough cards in their hand, which you could shift and lean a little bit more towards like strip and bounce rather than strip and stun, because stunning at this point with how wide of a field it is, if you can't stun the whole field, it doesn't matter.
yeah, you're not wrong. You're definitely not wrong per se. Um, I just I do think there's some merit, but it would require a very strong pilot. Um, so it's very likely it probably won't happen, but I could see it. I can't see Grace unless somebody really high rolls, because that's the only way you can do good at the current moment with that deck.
Yeah, especially
Um,
since you lost the ability to even just casually run the Zudomon promo. So like
yeah,
you were rookie, your extra rookie slot is like insanely limited on what you even can run, and it's just like depending on what egg you run, kind of just depends on what you feel like. I think Ukomon is just the easiest fix, but it's not. The deck isn't quite there yet.
no, we just need another piece, which we'll eventually get, but uh, currently we don't have it. So uh, that will be when we get it. Basically, eventually when we get it, was it next set, the next set
BT
16.
16.
Yeah, 16 is when we get that. So we won't be getting it for a while, but that is okay. I don't think it's a problem per se. It's just tedious, but it's all right. Uh,
Right. And
and
we do have the floor plan layout for where all of the different like games are going to be taking place in the convention center, where their demo stations and signups and all that stuff. Like it seems like this almost is like just shy of a convention rather than just a full-blown tournament. And I was talking about this with Tyler where it's just like, yeah, if I don't do well, there's tons of other games and side events that I can check out and other activities like live artists from Japanese musicians, which I'm super excited for. um and the weather is actually supposed to be good. I took a look. It's supposed to be like mid 60s, high low 70s throughout the weekend. No rain. I think like on Thursday there's like 10% chance of rain. So not crazy. And then the whole rest of the weekend is dry. So we get that good California weather that we were robbed of last year.
I mean, that's good. At least things are lining up good. Hopefully, knock on wood, nothing changes from now till then. Um, because if it's anything like Florida, then a flip of a dime, it changes.
Yeah.
But
Speaking of changes, I think this is a good point to talk about probably the biggest change that is looking to come to Digimon based on just what the Japanese side has been saying. And there was like this video that they posted, like their usual, like, yeah, this is just the Digimon update stuff. And they slipped in the fact that they want to unify the game's releases by 2025, which is BT20 by January, by like literally January. Um, so I think that's incredibly ambitious. The Japanese side has a roadmap for, when sets are going to be released. So we can kind of see where things are going to be based on that. Because we already know, like, what? EX6 is coming out in March for them, I think. Like, it might be sooner. So they have EX6 and BT7 coming out before April, and then on April they get the starter decks for Liberators. Then May they get EX5 or EX7. Um, May, June they get BT18. Then like August or September they get uh another BT19. Then November they get EX8. We don't know what any of the details of these are. We just know like when they're getting sets. And then by January 1st is BT20. So the kooky thing about that timeline is it works for Japan. It doesn't work for anyone else.
Yeah.
Because they're getting EX6 and BT17 like now-ish, somewhere between now and March. And we're getting, just as a frame of reference, EX6 by June, and we are getting where'd it go? I just had it. Oh, and we're getting BT17 in August. So we have how many sets do they have? So we know we're getting the Liberator set shortly after that, or the decks. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets we're gonna be behind, that they're gonna have to figure out a way to be able to like get us there by January from August.
Ew.
So yeah, I highly doubt they're gonna do a set every single month. They could. I think that's an incredibly stupid decision just to catch us up. I think with all of this time, and if that was their plan all along, like, and they knew they were gonna do that, they probably are gonna start. At least the smartest thing to do is just combining sets. Like, do what they've done for 1.0 and 1.5, and then they've also done that in China where they just combine sets. It's going to make the sets all wonky just because pull rates are going to be god awful, but it's their fastest, most efficient way to be able to get us caught up within that time frame. Because what? They could just combine. Oh god, they have 3 BT sets that they're gonna have to combine somewhere. So yeah, it's gonna look really wonky because they did that technically with,
I
but
was
we
like,
also
yeah,
have two
one through
EX.
three.
Yeah, but we also have 2 EX sets, so it's just like,
Yeah, those weren't there either. So it's like they would either do something like 1.5, where it's like 1.0, 1.5, and then maybe another version of that with EX, with the 2 EX sets. I have no clue how that's going to work.
yeah,
Even
starter
though
decks are
I,
starter decks. They'll just be their own thing.
yeah, that don't. Those are whatever. They can come out whenever. Um, I assume they'll probably push them out as soon as possible, just so that they can quote unquote be online with everybody. But it's it's how do I say it? It's interesting. I'm very open and for it. I just am wary of how they're going to go about it.
Yeah.
From the consumer standpoint, at least. I fear for how they're going to go about it.
Bandai exactly doesn't have like the best track record to make me have confidence that this is going to work
Exactly.
out
Exactly.
the way that they hope and anticipate. Because look at RB1 as an example. That set was an absolute colossal failure. People could like it all they want. I've talked to multiple stores, and stores just can't sell it. They can't. It's at a point where it is just a toxic asset to them. My LGS was actually trying to fire sale them off on me because they know that I buy a lot of Digimon. I actually didn't buy into that set at all, and they're just like, "Oh, you didn't buy this one. Do you want to buy it at cost?" And I was just like, "Well, what's that
No.
cost?" And they were just like, $40. And I'm just like, that's the same price as TCG player. And if everyone's selling the set at cost or at a loss, like it's just not looking good. So hopefully we could avoid an RB situation with whatever combination they would concoct to be able to get us caught up in that timely manner. But I was thinking maybe they're not going to have us be that quite on par. So they have BT20 coming out in January. So maybe by like BT21, which could give them like 2 or 3 more months to be able to space things out, combine things more properly. Maybe that is a more realistic thing. And I have no idea. This is just based off of the little bit of Japanese information that we have. So obviously, we would want and need more information when it pertains to the English side of things. But just the unification of the game is actually huge. It is huge because for the longest time, like basically all of since the game
It's like the
started,
entire lifespan of the
yes,
game.
we've just been taking like the English side. We have just been taking Japanese data and basically picking up where they have left off, and making a couple adjustments based on like special rule changes for like, oh, this card was banned for us, but it wasn't banned for Japan. What do we do without that? How do we like adjust? Kind of like what we're in right now, where Japan had Purple Melga. We don't. I mean, you could. It's just you're missing 2 rookies, and the consistency of an inheritable, which actually does matter towards like how the deck functions. It's not the most ideal way to play Melga right now, with the limitations, but Japan didn't have that problem. So with the unification, it basically just removes that entirely, and everything's going to be on an equal playing field, which I like. As nervous as I am, I'm also super excited for it because of all of the new possibilities that can come with it.
Oh, I'm so for it. This sounds so much fun. The only like quote unquote downside you get, I guess you could say, would be we don't have the Japanese to players to like be our testers essentially.
Yeah, to fix bad
So
formats, like if another apocalypse
uh,
happens, we're all suffering.
yeah, we're exactly. So I guess that's good in terms of unifying the player base. So if all of the players are complaining about cards, Bandai's probably going to act faster um, than they probably would have beforehand because it's only one half and then the other half can deal with it later type situation. So at least in that regard, it's better, quote unquote. And that's just this is all hypothetical because it could be if I'm thinking about it the way I'm thinking about it, it should theoretically be better. We don't know how they'll handle it though, because we're just not there yet. But when we get to that point, I'm very interested to see how they handle the restriction list and things like that when cards are problematic, and if they deal with them in timely manners, or if they're just gonna wait like they normally do with JP, because JP be sitting in them stuff. They sit in those formats for a while, like like, and they just mull and suffer through the format. So I hope that the idea of them being unified doesn't keep that ideology of, well, we'll see if people figure out the way to deal with it. It just depends, of course. It really depends on what the card is and what it does, because like the Pokemon just doesn't have a counter. But like, like for example, like Black War Gray X. People were like, "Oh my god, that deck needs to be hit to the ground. The Black War Gray needs to go." I remember that argument being had, and I'm like, does it really have to go? Like, you just there are ways to play around it. There are decks that absolutely dumpster it. So it's like, does it is it really that big of a problem per se? And then as we see, people figured it out. They played Grandis. They focused more on like Setcon and things like that. And there were ways to play around it. Um, and exploit that it has to build up. It has to get that big good stack in order for you to really get a lot out of it. So I'm wary of that, but for the most part, it should 90% be just all good.
I think it
Like,
is because like right now with Worlds this year, and last year too, they were put into a really awkward position where it's just like, okay, we're gonna have our Japanese players dial it back to where the English players were for Worlds. Which I'm not a Japanese player. I don't know how they feel, but it seems like a really
correct.
awkward thing where it's just like, well, why? And like it just makes stuff like this way smoother where it's just like, oh, we're already all on the same page, the same format, and we're all discovering stuff together. And I think like it just makes things feel more cohesive in terms of like from a
It's just all
business
one community
yes.
rather than it be okay. Well, JP has their community, we have ours.
And I
It
have
won't.
no idea if they're gonna combine more Japanese sets now, just to, or not Japanese, Chinese sets to be able to get Chinese to be all
Yeah, I was
caught
about to
up with
say to
us.
catch up too. I
Um,
was like,
because they've been combining their sets for a while. I have zero idea what's exactly happening or where the Chinese side of things is at, but like maybe they're gonna try to take some notes in terms of how to do those combined sets and then take what they learned from that to apply it to ours if we even are getting combined sets. I don't know. We're still missing way too much information. But as far as like future impact, this is also going to impact the secondary market in a huge way because right now we could take a look and see what's coming out in Japan, what's good in Japan, and then start buying and preparing for that. That's all eliminated. And because
yep.
that's all eliminated, it's going to make the secondary market more of a wild west as to like what's actually going to be good. And I think that's going to be very helpful to the game as a whole, actually creating more value because like we're looking at the newest set that just came out, EX5. Well, we already know Leomon basically did nothing in Japan. Leopardmon basically did nothing. Like I could go and list all of the super rares and all of the decks that basically did nothing, and say that oh the card's price is reflecting what their performance was in Japan because they didn't do anything. Versus like Grace Nova's getting BT16 hype, so people are getting into Grace Nova. I don't know why people are getting into Fanglong so hard. I think it's because literally Fanglong's like the only high rarity card, which that makes sense. But regardless, we could see what was doing well, and we have seen trends where it's just like even though it was doing well in Japan, does that mean it's going to do well in English? More often than not, the answer is yes. Um, so that's
It,
going to change how we look at the secondary market.
oh yeah, I mean, 100%. Secondary market is probably gonna like flip on its head in the way that we uh we view cards. I think it's I don't know if it's gonna be the best. I feel like it's gonna be probably a little bit more volatile now
I,
because
I
now
think,
it's gonna be like once reveals happen, everybody's gonna be like, oh my god, and then everybody's gonna start buying out stuff, so it's gonna be even worse in that regard.
yeah, but I think
Because
that's going to like make things more fluctuate in a more healthier manner rather than this like very predictable cycle that we have right now that actually seems to be harming the secondary market because, you know, it
I don't think you're wrong. I don't think so. I don't think you're wrong per se. Uh, this is of course all hypothetical. We'll have to see how it is when it gets to that point. But
right, take this
I
with a
could see it.
ginormous grain of salt.
I could see it trending more healthy for sure. I think more for the most part, it should be a healthier market per se. Um, just because I think there's more good than bad. that is happening with the unification of the sets. Um, so I mean, I'm beyond excited. I cannot wait to not know anything. Like I can't wait to not prepare mentally for sets and things like that. And just come in pure surprise, just like the other JP players. Uh,
That's part of the fun that I feel like a lot of like North American players, if you are looking at the Japanese spoilers, is like kind of devoid, where it's just like we are just missing that experimentation phase because Japan's already done all of the heavy lifting for us. We just literally look at what they did and be like, oh, that's why. Um,
and then maybe
and
a tech card here and there pops up that
yeah,
synergizes more that we find, or something vice versa, back and forth. But
this is
it's pretty
also
minuscule.
yeah, this is also going to impact obviously bans and restrictions, and maybe this was a move to try to mitigate um, negative feedback from good bans and restrictions, because I think the purple hits that all came were very needed and very necessary, as much as like purple
It
players are
sucks.
complaining and it sucks for them. The cards have proven to be broken and busted in Japan, and they needed something to be done. And even though yes, we don't get to play with them in the same capacity they did, they saved us from toxic environments multiple times, and all we did was yell at them. So this unification also removes that, because now we get to play with the cards 1-to-1 with Japan, and then when something gets hit, there's no complaining that we didn't get to play with it in the same capacity we have in the past.
Yeah, that those mentalities should fade away theoretically.
Yeah.
Um, I hope. I hope they should theoretically fade away because that just won't happen. Uh, uh, it will be a very interesting time frame. I feel like that first like few months will probably be like a limbo state of is this really good? Is this really bad? We don't really know, and then it'll kind of lean towards it being better, just good for the most part.
I also think the unification could stem into various other things and aspects that we as a community might not even be thinking about, because Dragon Ball
Promo.
Fusion World is coming out in soon. I don't know. It's supposed to be early 2024. I don't think I have a concrete date, not that I care. But that game is supposed to be a unified game. It's also supposed to come with a digital client. So maybe the unification is to help not necessarily set up the groundwork for a digital client to be made on their end, but get them in a state that they need for if a digital client does come, and if they are working on one, well, everyone's already on the same page now. So, like, it just makes it easier for that, rather than, oh, this is concurrent with the Japanese format or whatever, or it prevents like a master or master duel. Yeah, master duel situation
Yeah.
where it's this like awkward hybrid format that nobody kind of enjoys because they have some really stupid and like ban lists for that game. I don't know. I don't follow Yu-Gi-Oh, but regardless, it definitely helps set up a groundwork and a like a playing field in which they can feel more comfortable creating a digital client for.
I could see that. I could very well see that being the case. Um, I mean, there's a lot of things that should get better from that. The client is something that could be in the works due to that, or at least not due to it, but in tandem with it. Um, the 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 situation with promos theoretically should get a lot better
Well, I
now
mean,
that we
Bandai's still
won't
going to be
have them
shit with
separated
promos, but yeah, at least getting them on time.
on the
That's
same sets as the JP player base would get, so we don't see them 10 months later and then they're irrelevant beyond belief. So at least theoretically that should get better um, when it eventually catches up and all that other stuff because we're still missing quite a bit of cards. Um, I'm just baffled because I'm so interested to see how they're going to catch everything up. I'm like at a big loss because there's a lot of products we don't have.
Yeah, just from their roadmap, we already know where we are in terms of what Japan is getting, but we still have at least 5, 6 sets that just they're gonna have to come up with something, and I'm curious to see what they're gonna come up with. But
I,
speaking of looking ahead, we did get some leaks and spoilers for BT 17.
mhm.
This came from like the English side of things, where GTS is where I find all this information from. GTS distribution. That's the site where like half the player or half the shops like actually buy product to get it. So even though you can't see prices as a consumer and not a shop, you could still like see information. So one of the newest sets that they are going to be having is BT17, and they specifically said that there is going to be an alternate win condition card in the set, as well as like some other stuff. But one of the like big highlights was this special win condition, and then in that same video that they announced the unification, really briefly, they also showed off that card in English for whatever random reason. And it is a Diaboromon promo. So Diaboromon is going to be, or not really a promo.
I was like, it's in the set. Yeah.
Yeah, Diaboromon in BT 17 is going to have an alt win condition. I'm gonna try pulling it up real quick just
I have
so
the
I could
card here.
have that. Yeah, if you already have it up, you could read what it does.
So the card is called Clock of the End. And it has the security effect, add the card to hand. Main, play one Diaboromon token without paying the cost. Then place this card as the bottom Digievolution card of one of your Diaboromon without Clock of the End in its evolution sources. So because the tokens are Diaboromon, you can place them under the tokens. Um, which is I think the idea is you have a bunch of them because the card also has a secondary effect, but I'll say that in a second. Start of your turn, if 4 Clock of the Ends are placed in the battle area, you win the game. Now, how do you get them to the battle area? The inherited effect is all turns when this Digimon would leave the battle area by an opponent's effect, delete one of your other Diaboromon to prevent it from leaving. So, Omni Protection, good. This is already solid. And then, end of your opponent's turn, you place the Clock of the End from the evolutions, or from this Digimon's Digi-Evolution cards to the battle area. So essentially, it has to survive your turn and your opponent's turn. And then the inheritable card, the Clock of the End, pops out, goes to the battle area. You need to get 4 of them out on the board in order for you to guarantee just win.
I think so. Like I studied design, and I think this alt win condition, in terms of actually trying to win the game, is complete garbage. But I also think that because of how Diaboromon works, it's just going to be fused in there because it can, rather than because that's the entire focus of the deck. Because Diaboromon just spamming tokens is already
Gotta
pretty.
do that no matter what.
Yeah, it's gonna do that no matter what. That is just what Diaboromon does, and he has a lot of like actually kind of insane cards. Thinking about it now, that synergize with it because you have BT2, Kurasarimon that gives you a 1 memory back whenever you play another Diaboromon, not limited to once per turn, and then you also have
Caramon.
yes, and then you also have the BT5 version, which gives all of the Diaboromon's Rush. Or Digimon of the same name, which obviously it's going to be Diaboromon. So it basically gives all of your Diaboromon's Rush. So, like, you have a whole bunch of different ways to be able to approach Diaboromon, offensively and defensively. Because he also has like other Diaboromons, like the Diaboromon Ace, the Diaboromon Promo that can like OTK your opponent because he gains Security Attack Plus for each Diaboromon on the field, including himself. You have the Erratas. Like, there's a lot that Diaboromon can do already to where he realistically doesn't need this alt win condition. And if you are trying to play for this alt win condition, there's a chance that because of how security works, you could just not get it because the opponent just might not attack your security until they're ready to just fully kill you, or like maybe in the future there's a way to just burn all of the security and then just not worry about a thing. Um,
Yeah, because once you need all four. So if one of them is trash from security or something, that's it. That win condition's done. You're never getting that card. You'll never get the win condition ever.
right. And
So
I think like alternate win conditions are literally only in two camps in terms of design. They're either the most meta relevant thing to have ever came out because of how good the alternate win condition is at, succeeding on its plan, or the other end where it's borderline completely unplayable because just it needs so much going for it that it's just not realistic. And this is definitely in that like not realistic camp where it as an alternate win condition, I'm fine with bad alternate win conditions because if this was like god tier, um obviously like it could do some very damage, like a lot of damage to the game.
well, I guess actually you can get it from trash because the Diabormon places from hand or trash. So it isn't. I don't think this condition is that bad. I don't think it's really that hard to be honest because
No, but if they just don't
it's just
attack
not easy.
yeah, if there's one in security and they just don't attack your security, you just don't get the win condition because you have no way to grab it as
Yeah,
Diaboromon.
and then you
Like,
just have to kill them in one turn or something. Like I could see that at least per se guaranteeing basically them losing. But if it's not in security and you are able to like because the new one automatically gets one. So then theoretically, if you're able to keep it on your turn, you could get two out in one turn.
right.
Um, and then all you need to do is either get another two out in the next turn, but that's still a lot harder. They have to survive too, and the tokens are weak. Only 3,000 DP. You can only have one at a time. In terms of like you can only tuck one under each one. You can't have three under one. So there's a lot of conditions that need to be met um, for it to be good. But I don't think it's the worst win condition. Like I don't think it's like, oh, this is just horrendous. Like I think this is actually fairly doable. It just isn't going to be easy because of how weak the tokens are.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it definitely creates a lot of extra versatility because we already know that Diaboromon is basically getting two sets of support back to back between
yep.
EX6 and BT17. So, like, between two new waves of support on top of like some really good stuff that just is coupled with some really bad old stuff, um, I actually think Diaboromon might be the best villain deck in the game. Um, because usually most of the time, a lot of the other like villain-esque decks are kind of dated because they just don't get support. They're like one and dones, and maybe they'll get like a card here and there. But Diaboromon getting two full lines, and we still also don't even have his X forms, means that there's still more potential for them to do stuff with the deck in the future. And I think that's going to be crazy towards that. But one of the other things that I've kind of noticed, because we also got the scramble cards.
mhm.
Uh, Scramble cards are going to be new promo cards, and these I have very mixed feelings on. I don't think they're as insanely broken as the
They're definitely
training
more fair
cards.
than the trade.
Yes, but I definitely like seeing them do basically another attempt at creating a art. I'm gonna just label it as an artificial staple until it's not, because the boosts basically just got phased out, so they're basically artificial staples. The training cards, because they're the best like actual staple territory card we have, like them injecting those staples are inherently problematic to the game. Like part of what makes Digimon cost as less or as little as it does compared to other games is the reduced amount of true staples that you actually need to get. Because immediately the second these training cards came out, let's just say the average is $5. Well, now that's $20 towards that deck when your deck might have only costed $20 before without the training cards. So it's just like it's artificially inflating the price because every single deck or like 70% of the decks need those types of cards. Um, so as far as what the scramble cards do, they are two cost options, one of each color, where during your main, you get to have one of your Digimon of the designated color Digivolve into a Digimon of the designated color that the option is from your hand by reducing the Digivolution cost by 3, and then this card goes into the battle area. So that first part's already pretty decent. It's not absurdly broken like the training card in terms of the efficiency of its cost reduction, but it reminds me of the plugin, the green plugin, and I thought the green plugin was a pretty fair card. This is just doing the same thing but better because it also comes with a delay ability where you get to return one Digimon of the designated color from your trash to the top of your deck. Then if you don't have a Digimon in play of that color, then you get to play a Digimon with then if you don't have a Digimon on your field, you get to play one Digimon of the designated color with 2000 DP or less from your trash for free. And it has a security ability where you basically just get to play the Digimon out for free. That's the 2000 or less. So there's a lot that this can do, obviously, especially since we know, like, oh, you could just revive a rookie searcher, and now it's basically a delay ability to search your deck. So it's doing like the reverse of what the training cards are going to do. And like my big problem with the card is, or like the series of cards, is the fact that we have borderline zero trash or grave hate, and more things are accessing that zone to where we need to start seeing some trash and grave hate, because this is why Anubis is going absolutely crazy right now in EX5, and that's why BT15 Apocalypse was the menace, is because once your trash is set up, it's done. Like, you don't have to do anything else. You're just all gassed for the rest of the game. You could do whatever the heck you want. And that's kind of like the big problem with purple is like once your trash is done setting up, you just have free reign to do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah, there's no way your opponent can't interact with it unless you're playing very specific cards.
Yeah, which I think we only have literally like two.
Merciful, and then what?
It's Merciful and Avenge Kidmon are the only cards in the entire game we have right now to interact with the opponent's trash. And Avenge Kidmon doesn't even do it entirely because he's just
only
options.
messes with options.
Yes. So we, outside of Omnimon Merciful, once something's in the trash, if you're not controlling that trash, it's staying there.
It's a free resource for the rest of the game.
Yes. And that's kind of where I kind of like take my problem with the scramble cards, is because like, oh, here's another way for stacked base decks to reduce evolution cost. And then
Are they only 2 cost?
Yes, they are 2 cost.
Really? I thought there were 3. Interesting.
No, they're very, very good. And like this puts like Digimon in a really awkward position where now they have to reevaluate how they're going to be designing their rookies, because as of BT14 we already started seeing rookies start generating resources and gaining advantage the second you move them out. Ukumon is obviously the biggest defender because it's a generic card that could go in anything, and there's 2 of them, one that gains you a memory, one that searches your deck. Borderline broken. Patamon, free evolution. Agumon, free evolution. They just revealed a new Salamon, gain a memory. Like, Gabumon from the starter deck and Agumon from the starter deck, gain a memory. Like, there's just so many rookies that they're printing now that just are trying to gain you advantage the second they move out. And Digimon used to be designed around 3 memory. Like, your play is going to cost you a little bit more than 3 memory, but you should be able to do everything you want on that 3 memory to get to where you need. Digimon now, because of just all of the ways that they have to increase the overall speed and efficiency of things, 1 memory. They changed it from 3 memory to 1 memory in terms of how efficient decks can operate. And like, there's some good in that where it's just like, oh, I got choked to 1. I can't make my play.
At least I can still play.
Yeah. I can't play the game, and now being choked to 1 doesn't even matter because you could just, oh, I'm going to move out, gain like 3 or 4 memory because I have multiple cards doing multiple different things. So like it's cool that you have more ability to respond, but it really kind of does damage the overall speed and pace of the game.
I've never been a big fan of it. I don't like how much memory generation is in the game. The only ones I don't mind are stuff like Tamers, and even that because you do have to set them up beforehand. And usually they're like 3 cost or above, except for the 2 cost ones, which I don't like those cards, but that's beside the point. I've never liked any form of memory generation unless it was very specific and required conditions. Um, and even then, that's still a little iffy because some decks can just bypass that. It's just there's a lot of gray area when it comes to that, and once you do it, you can't undo it because now the decks are operating with that in mind. So now you can't be like, oh well, now we just take it away because then the decks won't function, and then now they're all awful, and it's just like now you've opened the floodgates once, now it's forever. Now we'll always see stuff like that, and it really sucks because I don't mind that the game's fast per se, but I don't want the game to just regress into this what it is at the current moment. It's not so bad right now.
I think
Uh,
Anubis is basically the apex of what they don't want, where it's just like I can go into my mega super efficiently, turn two, and set up this board state where it's. I almost hate to bring Yu-Gi-Oh into this, but it's like almost Yu-Gi-Oh esque, where it's just like break my board state or I win the game.
Exactly. And that's not fun. That's not conducive to a back and forth. Like
No,
Digimon, the
which
reason I liked it a lot, or I love it, is because you have that back and forth a lot of the times. Um, Now, more recently, it kind of has devolved a little more into the did I see the pieces? I win, you lose. Did you see the pieces before me? You win, I lose. That's kind of what it's devolved into a little bit, with some nuance here and there.
it's because of
Um,
the way the game is being designed, like because it's faster, it requires more of that type of mentality where it's just like I need my pieces in order to be efficient by turn 2, and if I don't see them, now I'm starting to lose in a really bad way because I couldn't be able to respond to what my opponent was doing. And like Anubis and Apocally are basically the pinnacle of poor game design in terms of like where Digimon should be at. Like I've been on the record, I'll say it again. I think BT14 is borderline the strongest we should be at. And I know we're about to enter like a whole bunch of new sets where everything is going to start changing again, and that speed isn't going to be maintained. It's only going to essentially get faster on how
yeah,
little you could operate off of only a few cards. So like that's usually the big problem is when things become more efficient on the lower side. And you brought it up and I just want to touch up on it again. Like the ability to generate mana or memory or whatever resource you want to call what you're going to be paying for, Dawn for whatever, the second you start cheating on your resource system is the second things start going south in terms of overall game design. Like the fact that Anubis has 3 inheritables that will gain him memory. He costs 4 to use, and the cards that you could be discarding could also help you gain memory. So it's essentially a free card to use for his ability to give you another free card, to give you another free card. Like, I've said it in some of my older videos where free value is good value, but there actually has to be some sort of cost associated to that free value. And right now, there isn't. It's just, oh, my stack gains me a whole bunch of memories to make going up into my Digimon as efficient as possible, and then I just blow you out because my Digimon does a lot.
exactly. I mean, it just said it as better than I probably could have. It literally is just that, where it's how do I operate with the least amount of resources so that I can punish my opponent, and that's kind of what the game is at. Or it falls into the whole opposite end where it's like, well, my opponent's not doing anything, so I'm just going to set up really hard and just blow up in one turn. And then if my opponent can deal with it, I win. If my opponent can't, then or yeah, if my opponent can deal with it, they lose or they win. If they can't, then I win, and it's kind of just like that, which kind of sucks.
I mean,
Um,
right now, because
it's
Anubis
not
is like,
so bad.
yeah, Anubis is basically the only card right now in EX5 that's able to be able to set up a
It's
deck
just
to be
auto
that
win.
way. Because right now, like we've seen in BT14, the ginormous meta spread, like a deck's power wise are a lot more equal because there's a lot of different play styles. There's a lot, like, I feel like because of Anubis, he is just choking the meta to be around him, and if you're unable to be able to fit inside of that meta bubble that he is now created, then your deck just isn't, it just can't be played. So like divas into Anubis, I don't necessarily think is a very good matchup because I can set up turn 2, you hard play your diva, and then I kill your diva with Anubis and then bring back more bodies, and it starts snowballing from there. So it's just like, is divas actually good in the EX5 environment? I would have to say no because of that. Um, and that's why I like Red Hybrids is probably one of my most favorite decks of all time because it has its own ways of like slightly cheating the system, but it is the most fair deck. Probably it's one of the most fair decks in the game. Like it's just a low to the ground aggro style deck, but I'm not like hardcore cheating on any aspect of the game outside of the fact that there's limited tamer removal. So setting up my tamers is really easy, but I don't have the most efficient ways of setting up my tamers outside of me hard playing them or them getting played off of an inheritable. And then the only other thing I'm actually like the deck actually is cheating on is the warp into an emperor into our level 6 because of how Takuya works from BT7. But BT7 was that set had a whole slew of problems similar to what EX5 is kind of in. And like the biggest thing that I wanted to take a look at in terms of like their design space is they seem to keep making the same mistakes over and over again where they want to not have OTKs and not have this like hyper fast degeneracy, yet they keep making cards that do it. It's just like they could probably unlimit the Digisorption for 0 or the Digisorption 3 guys that basically Digivolve for 0 because decks already do that anyway. So it's just
That's,
like
like,
is like the
it's
fact that this band or this limited pair of cards because of how efficient they were are basically on par with the efficiency that we have now is actually kind of sad. Um and the
it's
fact that
absurd.
yeah, the fact that they just keep upping the amount of tempo and generation like and resource generation that the game can operate on is like it is absurd and they really need to stop doing that. Like Garurumon, if anyone is curious, I might do a video on this. Garurumon is the number one hit deck. That deck has seen the most limitations to it compared to any other deck in the entire game. The reason for this: good consistency, good damage output, and good tempo efficiency. Like it just nails everything so perfectly that they just had to do something about it in every step of the way. Oh, let's remove security attack plus. Now it doesn't have the damage to OTK, but it still has the efficiency to go up. Let's nerf Garurumon X, which was generating you a mana for or generating you a memory for going up into it. Like they have these abilities that are just inherently gaining you like extra resources while you're going up your stack, and therein lies the problem with Digimon is like when you're starting to go net even or net positive for using your cards that should be costing you something. That's Digimon's biggest design problem that I've been noticing with the most recent stuff.
And he explained, the guru thing very, um, very generously because they were pretty egregious cards. Every single one of those cards is absurd, like what they do. Like, it's not only do they generate you memory, they generate you card advantage. They set up the trash so that you can use the inheritables to protect it. They, of course, give you the extra memory. They're efficient in terms of evolutions. They're either free or gain them memory. And then you're constantly able to swing, unsuspend. Like, even without the security plus, you can still OTK somebody with the deck. Like, that's how absurd the cards are. And they needed to be limited because of how efficient they are without going into a boss monster. Like, that was like the biggest thing with it, is that most decks, when they're doing their like big OTK turns and things like that, they're more often than not they're going into a level 6, and that level 6 is then putting in all the pressure. In that deck, you can bypass going into a level 6 and just straight up OTK from a level 5. That's not okay, because you're, at least in when it was, back then, it was just too much. It was too quick and too fast for every other deck. Then it just could not deal with the speed. And then come more recently, where we get the new stuff from EX5, it only exacerbated the problem even more. So it's like, and those cards are on top of not being specifically generic, or specific to Garurumon. They're generic. They just generically give you memory, and that all you have to use is the bottom end, that, and then you can use whatever top end you want. So it's like, it it was just too good all over the place. On top of it being good in Metal Guru.
Yeah, I think like part of the problem stemmed from BT9, because we
Oh yeah,
had like abilities to be able to gain us memory, but it wasn't to
far
the
and few
amount.
between.
Yeah, it wasn't, because like my biggest example is like going all the way back to like Titamon. It's just like, okay, Titamon at the time had one inheritable to gain him memory, but again, that's because the game was based off of 3 memory. So it's just like Titamon costed 4 to evo, so he needed some way to gain that memory back. So like in BT6, he had one inheritable to do that, so it's just like memory setter, level 5 in raising, move out, digivolve into Titamon, do Titamon things. Like that's just how the pace of the game was back then. And now it's just like, oh, I'm going to go from my rookie to my level 6, swing all your security, and hope you don't have a way to be able to kill me the next turn if I wasn't able to kill you this turn. So it's just like, that's the part where I did notice like a lot of design changes, and Bandai has the ability to just not print these types of cards. And they have to treat some of them very cautiously, and they kind of aren't. And that's the only thing that like worries me with this type of news that we got. Like, obviously the unification of the game is going to be like probably the biggest thing ever in the game's entire history, but in terms of like some of the stuff that people aren't exactly looking at, it is some of the design changes that they have been making with each set or each block even. Because the way I look at it is Bandai designs in blocks. They just have this lump of cards that they make, and then they're just like, yeah, this will go here, that'll go there, that'll go there, and then they just divvy it up that way. Obviously, that's probably not exactly what they do. That's just what it feels like they do. Um,
Yes.
and and with Aces, and knowing Dragon Ball's history, next block we're gonna get a new gimmick entirely, and Aces is just gonna, it's not gonna go by the wayside, but it's gonna be used less and less. And I really liked Ace as a mechanic with Overflow. I think like they do have some really good designs, and obviously they are really good with fitting the cards thematically, both artwork and abilities, with how the Digimon was represented in its original media. And I think like no other card game has done that to the level of success that Digimon has. But like they just need to be aware. Like, I don't even think that they're aware of their own issues that they are putting themselves in. Um
I think they
and
just don't care until it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I think it's more of that. I think they're aware, they just don't care. But they are trying to make this game as interesting as possible. And like this, even though 2023 wasn't necessarily the greatest year, there was a lot of good that came out of it in terms of like the later half, with having some of the best metas we've ever had, and having like just a huge renaissance thanks to the resurgence booster. Even though that wasn't good for stores, it was good for players. Like they're making some really correct and right steps to try to make the game as appealing as possible. And I definitely think that in 2024 they are trying their darndest to accomplish that goal even better. And that's what has me like, even though I see flaws in their design, I can look past that because I could see what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. And like if they keep up with what they're doing and the pace that they're at in terms of like how we can benefit the players, like that's what's really keeping me in the game more than anything, is the fact that they are like they're actually trying to make it enticing for me to want to play.
See, for me, honestly, if for me keeping me in the game, I just love Digimon. Period.
I mean, I
The
love the
IP.
IP, yeah. That's always a
Um,
given.
but aside from specifically that, it's definitely the community for me. At least the community that I am a part of. The groups that I play with, I do enjoy our groups here and there, like ours, and then I play with another one, Devilish Card Games. I enjoy those two communities a lot. Um, I just have a lot of fun. I made some good friends, so I'm quite happy with that. And I think Digimon is one of the better games in terms of community, where it's not as toxic. There are always bad eggs, so I'm sure somebody will say something about a bad egg and how there's a guy there locals who's awful, but that's everywhere. So they'll always they'll always be that. But for the most part, I very much enjoy this community. Um, and not looking at like Facebook and stuff like that. I don't really care about that stuff. Um, Mainly the people I interact with.
Yeah.
So
I think the community is definitely good, but I wanted to try to end things on a little bit more of a positive note because
yeah,
compliment sandwich. You start off with something really positive, then you transition to some criticisms and end on a nice positive note. And I'm excited to see what the next competitive season is going to hold. I'm curious to see how Nationals is going to play out as far as next week's episode. Um, I don't necessarily think we'll have the Nationals data, so it'll probably just be talking about the Nationals experience. I'll see if I could get some guests on that while I'm at Nationals, just because I could actually physically talk to people. So
yeah,
it'll be nice to see whoever does end up coming out to Nationals.
yeah.
And it's just going to be a good celebration all around, and I'm super excited. So I hope everyone is looking forward to just even not attending nationals, just what can come out of nationals.
I'm excited. I'm sad I can't go, but I'm still excited for y'all. I hope y'all have fun. Good luck in the tournament. Um, just play smart, take your time, eat, sleep, all that other stuff. If you are going, take care of yourselves. That matters first. Remember, this is a game. It is not. It is not life or death. So make sure you guys are treating yourselves and your everyone around you good as well.
Yeah, proper hygiene and nutrition is also important. So, on that note, I want to thank everyone for coming out and listening. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please feel free to share it with others on social media, post it everywhere and anywhere you can. And thanks again, and we will see you next time.